Hi, I'm Neha. I work as a senior manager at CLASP. Today I'm joined by Divya Sharma. Divya works as an executive director at the Climate Group India program. Divya leads a team of professionals who work with governments and businesses across the world as well as India in mitigating climate change through various areas such as industry, transport and built environment. Welcome Divya, we're really excited to have you here and look forward to having the conversation with you. So climate change is one of the biggest threats that the mankind is facing today, and with COP concluding in less than a week ago, there are lots of thoughts and perceptions about whether it was successful or not in keeping our target of 1.5 degree Celsius temperature increase. So I wanted to hear from you as you work closely with governments and businesses in mitigating climate change. What are some of your reflections from COP27?
Thank you, Neha, and I'm pleased to be here with you. So thank you for having me here. I think it's an interesting question because a lot of reflection is happening at the moment around COP and what we derived and what we achieved from COP27. The first thing that I would like to reflect is the fact that we've seen youth and indigenous presence this time in COP, which was not only felt but also looked like it was an effective presence. Although we still don't have youth and the indigenous community into the negotiation table, but still it is a good sign. The other thing that I would like to reflect upon is that there is still not enough women on the table for negotiations on climate policies, which is such a shame. It was the 27th version of Conference of Parties, and we still are sitting here and asking about the fact that women are underrepresented in one of the world's most pressing problems that we see today. So I really felt disappointed, and I see that there is a lot of disappointment across the board around something like that. The second thing was that we are still talking about accelerating the pace of energy transition and making stronger commitments and also making smarter regulations. We should have showed some impact already by the time COP27 had happened, but it looks like there is definitely a lack of consensus between countries and governments, which is again disappointing because we are working towards a common good and we are already in climate emergency. What would it take for us to realize together that we have to work like communities and not different nations to bring those commitments on board? The third reflection around this has been a welcome step that the nations have realized and accepted of creating a loss and damage fund. There has also been conversation around putting a sense of nature positive as important as carbon neutrality, because nature-based solutions, resilience and adaptation are as important for emerging economies and low-income countries.
So that's very interesting to know and gives a lot of food for thought for everyone. And particularly, I really liked your thoughts around participation of women in COP, even though the role of women and participation is increasing, but clearly it's not enough and there's a lot more that needs to be done. Now moving closer to home, with India's strengthened NDCs of reducing its emission intensity of GDP by 45% by 2030 from the baseline year of 2005, it requires a concerted effort from various stakeholders, which includes governments, businesses, and civil society organizations. So I wanted to hear from you, what are some of the initiatives that you are undertaking with governments in India as well as globally to help mitigate climate change?
Climate Group is a secretariat to Under 2 Coalition. Under 2 Coalition is world's biggest coalition of subnational governments. We are about 270 governments strong globally, and we have 7 members in India now. 7th one is to be announced, so we are now 7. These governments have taken a pledge when they join Under 2 to not only work towards achieving Paris Agreement to 2 degrees centigrade reduction temperature, but also work and strive positively towards taking it to 1.5 degrees centigrade, which is what we need at the moment. What has also happened in the past few years and months is that the coalition has recognized the importance of net zero. and 40 out of the 270 subnational governments have actually taken the pledge to become net zero by 2050 or earlier. Our MOU with the government, subnational governments, which is a non-binding, non-legal entity between the subnational government and climate group, also is now poised to outline that we would like to be a net zero coalition in the coming years. How we work with these governments is we support them in their respective climate actions, in understanding what type of greenhouse cut they can do and how, in terms of what kind of energy transition they need to take, but also looking at some of their positive stories around adaptation, around resilience, around local community-led instances and work that they are doing to become more resilient to the climate impacts that have already happened, the climate change that has already happened. Some of the initiatives that we work around in India and in particular are supporting very closely some of the state governments. So for example, our State Climate Fellows program, where we have deployed climate fellows into the state departments, and they are supporting them in things like bringing them closer to the wider network that is working on climate action, interdisciplinary coordination, technical assistance, bringing them news, insights and research around some of the work that they are doing to scale up their work, to accelerate their work and bring more depth to some of the actions that they want to take. For example, supporting the implementation of State Action Plan on Climate Change or revision on State Action Plan on Climate Change, or also providing inputs to the nationally determined contributions, NDCs of the national government. The other program that I would like to mention is State Climate Leadership Initiative, which is supported in India by MacArthur Foundation, where we look at leadership examples from states in India around climate action, and we take them to the wider global network that we have. We have knowledge platforms, we have one-to-one engagement programs. We come with a huge network and we bring that network closer to home through this program. The third initiative that I would like to mention is called the Climate Footprint Program, which is supported within the International Climate Initiative funded by the German government. And this program helps government to see how they track and report their greenhouse gas emissions. And in turn, they also learn about what are the various ways in which they can accelerate some of these cuts. There are several such initiatives. One of the other initiatives is ZEV communities, which is zero emission vehicles communities, where we are bringing together businesses and governments to look at how they can accelerate the transition to electric vehicles. We are working with Maharashtra, we've worked with West Bengal in the past, we have worked with Delhi government around looking at how we can position their state level EV policies, and we can bring them closer to the businesses who can actually implement and help them implement and scale up some of the targets that they have taken within these EV policies. There are a host of other initiatives that are bound to the Under 2 coalition work that we are doing, where we are very closely not only monitoring the work that is happening at the subnational level, but a great recognition that how these global platforms can bring ideas, innovations together, and how people can learn from each other, and these things can be then drawn back or reflected back to the policies that will come in the future.
Okay, now moving on to our favorite question, to our favorite topic, which is energy efficiency. So CLASP has been working in in the field of appliance energy efficiency for over 2 decades. And energy efficiency is instrumental in helping India as well as world achieve its climate mitigation targets. In India, based on some of the estimates that we have, it contributes as much about 60% to the total climate mitigation targets that we have. So it plays a huge role. I wanted to understand about your thoughts and the role that Climate Group is playing in working with different governments and businesses in moving that needle on energy efficiency, and what are some of the initiatives that you are undertaking in that regard?
So at Climate Group, we work across 5 systems, which includes industry, energy, transport, built environment and food. Under these systems, we also have our major campaigns, which are global campaigns. 3 out of which are hundreds campaigns, more, better known as hundreds campaign. RE100, which is renewable electricity, EVs, which is electric vehicles, EP, which is energy productivity. So EP100, RE100 and EV100. We also have Steel Zero and now Concrete Zero as well. So these are our 5 flagship campaigns, which are global campaigns, as I said, through which we work with businesses to accelerate their climate action and look at decarbonizing the industrial sector. RE100, for example, is a campaign where businesses take ambitious target around deploying renewable electricity across their operations. So globally we have about 390 members, out of which 8 are in India, and they are really working towards making space for a transition that is not only quick but sustainable. And in transport systems, we have EV100 campaign, where progressive companies such as Flipkart, Zomato and others have taken pledge to transition their entire fleet into electric by a certain target years. In India itself, our member companies, which are 13 in the number at the moment, have pledged deploying 2 million vehicles, electric vehicles on road, with 1600 plus charging stations to support charging and to support that these vehicles are sustainably deployed in the roads. The EP100 campaign, it looks at energy productivity, so hard to abate sector, industrial processes that cannot very easily or quickly change to or transition to renewable electricity. Otherwise also, energy productivity is a major element, efficiency, in the operations when it comes to businesses and industrial production. And we work very closely with World Green Building Council to make sure that some of these targets are achieved. And net zero buildings is something that is coming up very quickly, because net zero targets and net zero buildings targets will actually have a lot of complementarity if we want to achieve net zero targets in the near future. Then Steel Zero is our new campaign. It was launched globally last year, but we launched it in India this year itself in July. This is about green private procurement of steel, net zero steel. What we are doing is we are working with an entity called Responsible Steel that actually certify the carbon content of the steel. So basically they certify the steel to be clean and green and carbon free. And some of these industries who take steel as a raw material are our clients. So we are not working with the steel producers, but through this campaign we are working with the companies that are using steel and making sure that the steel that they buy is net zero steel. What will happen then is we will be able to influence market and therefore increase the demand for clean steel. So this is about Steel Zero, and very soon we'll be deploying Concrete Zero, where we'll be looking at low carbon or net zero concrete for building construction industry. And it will be making a huge difference if real estate, if the construction industries will come together around some of these campaigns. We know that about 70% of India's infrastructure is yet to be built. And picture this, if at least half of this is Concrete Zero, then we would be reducing immense number of greenhouse gas emissions, and the transition will be really impactful and quick. So some of these campaigns actually are the cornerstone of our work in India as well as globally.
So it's very interesting to hear about your thoughts on particularly the initiative of where you are working with the procurers, with the businesses who are procuring these steel in ensuring that it is sustainable, because if there is a demand, then only manufacturers will end up producing it. So it is a very innovative thing, and I really like that thought. On that note, I also wanted to understand from you that you're working a lot with businesses in kind of promoting the climate agenda. But at the same time, what are some of the initiatives, and if you are already thinking about how businesses incorporate just and equitable as well as inclusive transition wherein we take everybody along so that nobody is left behind. So are there any thoughts and efforts on that front?
Yes, and also on EVs, we are now looking at electrification of medium and heavy trucking. So we are also now trying to influence the logistics sector, because that is one sector which holds a lot of market around transition to electric vehicles, and it's taken off in countries like US already, but we are now through one of our projects bringing it to India as well.
It's very interesting to hear about your thoughts on particularly the initiative of where you are working with the procurers, with the businesses who are procuring these steel in ensuring that it is sustainable, because if there is a demand, then only manufacturers will end up producing it. So it is a very innovative thing, and I really like that thought. On that note, I also wanted to understand from you that you're working a lot with businesses in kind of promoting the climate agenda. But at the same time, what are some of the initiatives, and if you are already thinking about how businesses incorporate just and equitable as well as inclusive transition wherein we take everybody along so that nobody is left behind. So are there any thoughts and efforts on that front?
Yes, so if we look at the way we work with the businesses, there are 2 or 3 major elements to our work with businesses. So when a business takes a campaign, for example, we also hold them accountable. So accountability and ambition are foremost. First, the business should take and have that ambition to take the commitment, and a higher commitment, so to say. Once some of these big businesses who have the lot of political clout as well as resources to make this transition quickly and to scale, they actually start influencing their value chains automatically. When we hold them accountable, they actually report some of the work that they are doing, some of the impact that they are making. And when they actually disclose some of these impacts and their work, it again has a lot of influence downstream. The other way is also providing them these engagement frameworks and engagement platforms. It's a big network of businesses that we work with. It's huge, and it has a lot of potential to make the dent as well as influence the various stakeholders, including government. So the value chain influencing happens with these engagement platforms. The third is policy influencing. I'll give you one example. We had created a working group which was called as RE100 Policy Ask, where we had some of our RE100 members work with us together to look at some of those barriers to this transition and what policies can help them divert these barriers or overcome some of these barriers. And this actually has led to us working or going to the government and saying, this is the voice of the businesses, these are the problems that they face. Can some of the policies support some of this transition, which will actually eventually help the businesses down the line, MSMEs, value chain partners, to actually also transition into renewables, transition into energy efficiency with less cost than what they would have done when these businesses had not come on board. So creating that demand, networking, bringing them all together is something that will happen, and eventually it will affect the businesses down the line, the value chain stakeholders down the line, also influencing policy, as I said. So that is one way to do that. There are also forums with our government work that are particularly working on just transition, and a state like Mumbai is also part of those forums, the just transition forums that we have created, where we are not only voicing some of these needs and asks, but we are looking at how best can just transition happen? How can we ensure that when jobs are lost, new skills are being developed and new jobs or green jobs are created? And who will be impacted? And what can state governments, subnational governments do? What kind of policies will we need to make that transition supportive and just, and of course inclusive?
This is very good that you've already started thinking about it, and that you are already holding consultations and thinking through the jobs and some of the working with the states and ensuring that transition is just and equitable, because that is the way it should be going ahead. That we should be going ahead, where climate agenda also includes the developmental priorities of the country. So that's the way to go. So that's very insightful to know. Now, what in your view are some of the key actions that the government in India as well as globally could take to help achieve our climate mitigation targets? Because you have several initiatives and you work with a wide variety of subnational as well as national governments. So what are some of the thoughts and initiatives that you think that the governments could take to help us move towards our climate mitigation goals?
I think we are doing pretty good as a country. I know that there have been some kind of skepticism around the fact that we've said that we will achieve net zero by 2070, while the urgency says that we should all be net zero by at least 2050. That said, there are a lot of interim targets that Indian government has taken, which are as close as 2030 and 2045, which will make the basis and foreground for some of this larger transition that will happen in the years to come. It is quite likely, and that I think it is important for a country like India to keep the pace and leadership that they have taken during G20, during COP27, even COP26, so to say, to keep the pace and the momentum going. Because this decade, which is 2030 Paris Agreement achievement decade, is very, very important not only for the world but also for a country like India. What we do in the next 7-8 years by the end of 2030 will actually create the background of by when can we achieve our net zero. It could be earlier if we can, create the momentum at this moment. That's one thing. The other thing that I find very good with national governments or Indian governments' net zero transition agenda is that they are talking about economic development and just transition hand in hand. We've just also released the Mission Life, which talks about sustainable production, sustainable consumption and behavior change, which is the biggest thing to make a dent. One community or one sector or one system cannot bring the huge change that we are looking at. And it is not only a great ambition and a big task to become net zero by all the countries and as a world, but it also entails a lot of conversation around just transition, around resilience, around vulnerability and adaptation. And some of these things we have to be weaved together at some point. Behavior change is one of the important elements to it. So how do we practice some of these sustainability issues in our daily lives becomes as important as bigger transitions taken by businesses and governments and bigger ambitions and commitments that are being taken at business and government level. So I think overall we are doing fine. There's definitely more to be done because the target is huge, and there are several ways to do it, including some of these elements that I just spoke about.
I really like your point about the interim targets that the government has in order for us to reach the 2070 net zero emission targets, because these are interim milestones are the ones that help you take towards the overall objective. So that is very good insight. Now moving on to a more personal note, you are a recipient of prestigious Green Future Leadership Award, and you are an inspiration for a lot of young people and particularly women. So what is a key message that you would want to share for youth and people and women, and especially people who want to join the sector, who are looking to work for the environment in the sector? So what is the key message that you want to share?
So nice of you to ask me that question. The first thing that I would like to say is that any award is, it's a culmination of so many people working together. It is a reflection of the fact that I had a lot of supporters in my life who believed in me and also who supported me in the work that I did. I did not do it alone. So I always, whenever I'm asked this question, I like to make it clear that the award itself is about the people who stood by me and who worked with me very closely all this while. And there were very many women who were with me. There were more women than men in my own journey till date. The other thing that I have felt with my experience in life is that the most important quality that you could have to progress in life is sincerity. I don't think anything else would work. And I have seen areas and elements that are devoid of sincerity. I have seen people, workplaces, missions that are full of sincerity, and I've seen the huge difference that it makes. When you are sincere to your commitments, to your action, and about what you want to achieve in life, I think everything becomes easy and everything becomes clear. You cannot stumble if you are sincere in what you are doing. And I find it the most important virtue to have. And I think that is what I would like to say, that you must be sincere and you should always keep trying. Particularly for women, you will face a lot of roadblocks. Let's be prepared for it, because we have not yet entered into the world which gives that kind of inclusiveness, that kind of equitable, just treatment to women and girls. But I think you have to be very consistent about your efforts and have confidence and belief in yourself. Nobody can tell you what you cannot do. So I think that's what I have held for myself, and I've seen a lot of other women shine with that kind of attitude. It has to be very positive.
This has been very useful, and now as we inch closer to our to concluding our discussion, I really wanted to thank you for coming here and sharing your thoughts. It was very interesting discussion. Thank you so much.
No, I think it was very nice to speak to you, and thank you for having me here.